order. This is meeting number 18 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today we have the Minister with us for the first hour, and the second hour we will continue our study on forced labor. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of Canada and the forthcoming CUSMA review. We have with us today the Honourable Melanie Joly, Minister of Industry, and from the Department of Industry, we have Francis Bilodeau, Associate Deputy Minister, Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Welcome. And Kendall Hembroff, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the Industry Sector. So thank you all very much. We appreciate you being here. Minister, you have 5 minutes or so for your opening remarks, and then we will go on to our usual questions, which will be 5 minutes tight for all of us so that all of the members can make sure that they get their questions in. So if we can have kind of limited answers too, because otherwise you eat up all of the members' time, as you know. If you remember in those days when you were on the other side. So thank you very much for being here. I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Judy. So, Madam Chair, honorable members, it's a pleasure to be here. Merci d'être ici. Canada enters this CUSMA review at a time of profound global change. We're living in a much more complicated, complex, and dangerous world. The security environment of the world has deteriorated over the last few years with wars, but also through increased economic tensions, including the current trade war with the United States. And this will continue to be our government's reality. Nous savons qu'il y a des choses que nous ne pouvons pas
We know
contrôler.
that there are things that we cannot control, but there are many other things that we can control.
What we can control. Here's the plan. First, we'll protect jobs. Second, we'll create jobs. And third, we'll attract talent and investment. And our plan is working. We're seeing 2.6% growth, tracking to be the highest in the G7. Inflation has come down to 2.2%. Wages are up to 3.5% year over year. And in September alone, we created 60,000 jobs, and in October, we created 67,000 jobs. Ces résultats montrent que notre plan produit des
These results show that our plan is creating concrete results for our economy and for Canadians. The Canadian economy is resilient, but we're continuing to work ceaselessly for our people.
Protect jobs and protect industries. We're working in a reality where we know that we have certain sectors that are the target of the American tariffs. And of course, we're talking about steel, aluminum, auto, and lumber, industries that are vital to our economic strength and to our communities across the country. And here's what we're going to do for all of these sectors. In the short term, we'll protect our market and we'll offer liquidity to companies. We'll make sure that we support industries and the businesses and the workers in these sectors. And so we did so by tightening the tariff rate quotas on steel imports to 75% of the 2024 levels, a decisive step to protect our market in the short term and ensure the steel sector is protected. In the medium term, we need to make sure that industries can adapt and pivot. They need to be able to seek out new markets and they need to be able to develop new products. Et nous soutenons nos industries grâce à un nouveau fonds de réponse.
Industries, because we have a new strategic response fund of $5 billion, and also we have local or provincial economic development agencies. So we have to work to create a domestic market. Our government does it thanks to investments in defense, also our policies of buying Canadian, and also strategies in terms of housing, and also the major projects.
When I talk about Stellantis, I mean the Dodge Caravan, the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the Jeep Compass, the Jeep Wrangler, the Chrysler Pacifica. And I was clear at my committee appearance at Indu, Stellantis is on the hook. Within a day of Stellantis announcements on October 15th, I sent a letter to Antonio Filosa, the global CEO of Stellantis, stating that the company's actions were unacceptable and that we expected them to honor their legally binding commitments to the Government of Canada. On October 20th, I summoned Jeff Hines, the then Canadian CEO of Stellantis, for a meeting in Ottawa, joined by Vic Fideli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, and Lana Payne, National President of Unifor. On October 23rd, Together with the Minister of Finance, we announced a 50% reduction in Stellantis' annual remission quota. That means Stellantis has 50% less of a market for its cars without tariffs in our country. On October 30th, I went to Brampton to meet with the strong men and women who build the backbone of Canada's auto industry to let them know that we'll always fight for them. On November 3rd, I triggered the formal dispute resolution process under the contracts. And today, on December 4th, I'm formally announcing that we're serving Stellantis with a notice of default under the contracts. When it comes to protecting auto jobs, we will not let these industries down. We'll stand firm for the sake of our workers, our industries, and our nation, because defending these jobs means defending Canada's economic backbone and the livelihoods of countless families. Now, I've talked to you about the first pillar, which was protecting jobs. Let me talk to you about the second pillar, which is create jobs. And create jobs, and of course, beyond this, create industries. In every single crisis, there's an opportunity, and we need to act with audacity, purpose, and determination. While we know some things are beyond our control, creating jobs is really what we can do. And so what we're doing right now is we're investing in defense. Through a defense industrial strategy, we're also investing in major projects across the country. Meanwhile, what we will continue to do is to make sure that we can support our demand for steel, for aluminum, for housing, for lumber. We can do that through, obviously, the Buy Canadian policies and the housing policy that we've put forward. Finally, our third part of the plan, which is to attract. Le troisième pilier du plan, c'est attirer. Attirer des
Part of the plan is to attract investment, attract talent. And we've started already to attract talent. So we have $1.7 billion to attract 1,000 new talents and 1,000 researchers in Canada. And we're also working to attract investment. And that's why I was able to travel throughout Europe and in Asia to be able to attract new investment and protect sectors that are being targeted by our tariffs.
And of course, I've had the chance to have many discussions already at the Indo Committee in the House of Commons, and I look forward to having a conversation. Thank you so much.
Very much, Minister. On for 6 minutes, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, welcome to committee. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You mentioned Stellantis, so I might as well start there with the auto sector. Were you concerned when you saw the testimony last week from your officials that indicated that no one person read the contract front to back before that was signed?
Well, first and foremost, I think we have to put things in context. If you look actually at what was discussed and what my deputy minister at the time said, is that he was not involved in the redaction of the contract, nor was I, of course, because we were not in our positions at the time. As you know, the contract was signed some years ago, and you were not in your position neither. Now, what is clear is we both since then read the contract, and of course I can answer any questions
Wonderful.
about that.
When was it that you read the contract?
Well, when the
Like,
issue...
was it last week? Was it 2 years ago? What?
2 years
Obviously, it wasn't
ago-
2 years ago because you weren't there, but when did
That's
you
it.
read it?
So when the issue of Stellantis became really important, which was around October 15,
So you read it?
of course I read that
Okay.
contract because we got a 24 hours heads up from the global CEO saying that they were moving the Brampton Jeep model, well, the Jeep Compass model,
Right.
to the U.S. And we thought that that was completely unacceptable. So we got to it, and we found very quickly how to make sure that Stellantis was on the hook.
The testimony last week was that during the contract negotiations, no single person had a view on that contract cover to cover. Does that concern you?
To be frank, it doesn't.
Well, that was the
No, but
that was
like
the
you can't
testimony.
negotiate a contract without reading it. That doesn't make sense. Like, just
Well,
listen to what you're saying.
I don't
So-
know. The deputy minister said that the individuals involved would not have had full view of the contract. That was the testimony.
There were many contracts that were involved.
Okay.
All of those that are already, not only are they available right now, Adam, but they were available 2 years ago, and the opposition, so basically the Conservative Party, had access to it. And you guys
Well, no,
also
that's
read
not
the
true. I think they're
contracts.
just getting
so
them,
there's
you
nothing
know,
new here.
That's okay. So now that you've read the contract, that's fine. You've
Yeah.
read the contract. Were you concerned that the jobs guarantee in that contract, or are you satisfied with the jobs guarantee in the contract? Is it anything less than 100% of Stellantis's footprint at the contract was signed?
See, you know what was my reaction when we got the news from Stellantis? My reaction was, we can't open that floodgate of basically our automakers leaving the country. That was my reaction. And my reaction was also to make sure that everybody around this table is one Team Canada, because we're all fighting for the 125,000 jobs in the auto sector. And so I was in fighting mode, and I was finding how to make sure that we would make Stellantis on the hook. And what was clear in that contract is that the investments in the battery plants, which are super important, which we stand for and will continue to defend, were linked to the Brampton facility.
Okay.
And that's why we say it's on the hook.
On October 21st, you said in the House, the opposition on the committee will have access to the contracts. They will discover that we indeed negotiated well. Do you recall saying that?
I stand by it.
Okay. The jobs guarantee in the contract, is it for anything less than 100% of Stellantis's footprint at the time the contracts were signed?
See, what is happening is when you're dealing with an automaker, you know that there will be.
Minister, you're negotiating a contract.
I didn't negotiate the contract, but what I can tell you is that when you look at an automaker over a 10, 15-year period, you know that there will be changes in models. And sometimes during that time, that, lifespan, there will be time where basically there's retooling, and that basically people are put on pause to then, of course, being rehired. And that is all negotiated with Unifor. That is all negotiated with the unions. And so that is why it was really, really important to have a job number. But what was most important, Adam, and that's my last point, it was to link the protection of Brampton. Because there was a preoccupation at the time, and I wasn't there, you weren't there, but there was a preoccupation to make sure that we would protect the jobs at Brampton.
Is the jobs guarantee in the contract for less than 100% of Stellantis's footprint at the time the contracts were signed?
Listen, what I can tell you is that there's a job guarantee, and what I can tell you
So
also
there
is
is
that
a job guarantee, but it's for less than 100%.
For once, there was a link between the new funding that was given to create new jobs in Windsor to the Brampton plant.
So for anything
and
less,
that was really, really important, because when you look at it, and we learned from 2009 what the Conservatives did at the time. At the time, there was no job guarantee. So we made sure that that was the case.
Are there executive compensation restrictions like there were in 2009? Was there equity given to the government like there was in 2009? I'm sorry, Minister, but you can't compare those. And plus, that was 15 years ago.
Well, no, I think that they were in
15 years ago.
You are comparing
and you've negotiated,
the same
your
type
government
of
negotiated.
Mr. Chair, the translation is not good because we have
Minister,
2 persons in
your
the same
government
time.
negotiated. It sounds like your government negotiated a $15 billion corporate subsidy to Stellantis without 100% jobs guarantee for the footprint of Stellantis at that time.
I think you're mixing up
That's what it
things.
sounds like.
To be frank, you're mixing up things, okay?
So
in 2009,
will you say what the
please,
percent of the? Will you say
Madam
what the
Chair,
percentage?
I just want to be able to answer.
Let her finish because your time is up, and I want everybody to have a shot here today.
Yeah, of course.
Minister?
In 2009, when you negotiated and shook hands with GM and Chrysler at the time, there was no job guarantees, and following that, the Oshawa plant was closed for GM. The Windsor plant for GM was closed. The Ford assembly plant following that was closed, and the Orion bus assembly plant in Mississauga was closed. It was devastation. And we were the first government to bring back jobs in the auto sector because we were able to create around 3,000 jobs in Windsor, and we were able to create around 3,000 jobs in St.
negotiation was
Thomas.
good?
So it was really good investments.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Madame Lapointe, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very
Bien
much, Chair. Welcome, Minister Joly. I'm very happy that you're with us today. In 2018, there was the renegotiation of CUSMA, And you were already involved, Minister, and I remember that there were issues in terms of the acceptance for culture and protection of French. So we're looking at what's happening in Montreal, where culture's industry is very important. So can you explain the alignment of government on these very sensitive issues in Quebec and for all francophones outside of Quebec? Thank you. So the cultural exception is very important, especially in the renegotiation of CUSMA and for all our free trade agreements. So we put it in all our free trade agreements, but also we're part of the Convention on Cultural Diversity of UNESCO, which is very important, which is really our anchor in order to negotiate cultural exceptions. It's important because it allows the government after that to create legislation to protect our culture, to make the necessary investment without form of retaliation on the part of the U.S. and Mexico in this case, to support the Canadian Media Fund, Radio-Canada, CBC, National Film Board, and Telefilm. So yes, and every time I work with the Heritage Minister, the Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity. Thank you for that explanation. You know that my county is in the Lower Laurentians, and the aerospace industry is in Montreal, but also there's a lot in the Lower Laurentians. And Quebec has a strong concentration of businesses in aerospace, energy, and food technology and energy sector. So how will these sectors be protected in the next form of the free trade agreement? Well, those sectors will have an advantage because the supply chains between countries in the aerospace industry involves Canada, the U.S., and Canada. We see that American companies have invested in the Lower Laurentians, so Textron, Eswirus, and we also think of Bombardier, that they have plants in the U.S., so we know that everything is integrated and coordinated. But I would also add that it's not necessarily linked to CUSMA review, but it's related to our will to manage the consequences of these tariffs. So we're creating a strategy for defense, and we think that the aerospace industry will be a big winner because our basic rule in the strategy is to build in Canada. And so when we have a major procurement for defense, our objective will be to create jobs in Canada and to build plants in Quebec as well. So that'll be good news for my region to know that will ensure that defense investment also bear fruit in our part of the country, which I know very well. How does the government intend to use the review to increase the competitiveness in our sector? Canada is the only country of the G7 to have a free trade agreement with all other G7 countries. And the Minister of International Trade could give you more information on the free trade agreements that we have with other countries. It's quite high. When I meet companies wishing to invest in Canada, because I'm also responsible for investment made in Canada, our access to various markets in the world is an advantage for us that's very convincing. So in those circumstances, I think it will help our competitiveness. And there are different measures in the budget, including tax credits, that are very positive for attracting investment. But to come back to CUSMA, our goal will have to be to continue to have access to the American market and the Mexican market, knowing that we have some sectors that are targeted by tariffs that are unjustified, and we have to look after that, and that's my job, and it's part of my functions. I received questions in terms of industries that work in steel processing, and they we're talking about problems causing them these unjustified tariffs of 50% and 25%. What can I tell them? Well, they're right to say they're unjustifiable. They're direct victims of these tariffs. The way I see things, if we're in a trade war, the battle is on the economy, and the front lines are the sectors that are touched. In Quebec, it's aluminum, steel. Throughout the country, in Ontario, it's very much the automobile sector, and we know that softwood hurts everywhere, or is hurting everywhere in many regions in the country, certainly in Quebec. So my job is to be able to support people who are on the front lines, to help those entrepreneurs who are very, very concerned because they have to manage the impact of the tariffs. So they have to diversify their exports greatly and develop new products. And my role is to help them to adapt and to pivot. So it's a task that's demanding, but we had the population that gave us the mandate to do this.
Please, for 6 minutes.
La Présidente, merci pour votre présence.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to be here, Madam Minister, and also to your officials who are here. I wasn't going to ask this question, but my colleague mentioned culture, gave me the idea. So with the cultural exception, we'll keep it completely. Maybe you won't be the only one acting on that, but there's do you think that they might invoke the reprisals clause, or is there an exemption from that? Will it be total, or will it be only an exception chapter by chapter, as with Europe? Well, I'm not in charge of bargaining. The Prime Minister is in charge of this, and he's supported by Minister Leblanc. But what I can tell you is that as a Quebec MP and a Quebec Minister, for me, it's important to be able to protect in the free trade agreement that cultural exception, and the Prime Minister mentioned it in his election campaign and committed that this be protected. So you would be very favorable for there not being any reprisals provisions. Well, I don't know enough about what you're telling me, and I don't want to mislead you as to what's being currently discussed at the table. Oh, that's good. No, that's I'm fine with that answer. So in terms of culture, let's go from culture to agriculture. We had Minister Leblanc here. He said there will be no harming supply management, and can't do it through the back door either. Yes, that's our position, and we also affirmed that in our election campaign, and my colleague said it. He's the one who's working with the Prime Minister and who's in charge of that, so I agree with him. So we can't get around through the back door. No, we always already worked to develop something with the Bloc Québécois. And speaking about softwood, I don't have in my writing. Well, I have little trees, but there's no forest industry. Yes, it would be sad not to have any trees. But we're talking about total tariffs that go beyond 45%, and that's very, very serious for the industry. Can we expect a specific strategy for the softwood industry? I know that my colleague Tim Hutchison, the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, is working not only to put into place the plan that we have to support the softwood sector and the forest industry more generally, but also to have a plan to help businesses adapt and pivot. It's sure that it's a provincial jurisdiction, a Quebec jurisdiction, but also from the federal government. So we're there to provide support to attenuate or mitigate the effect of the tariffs. We worked with the BDC to offer a solution to a bank. So banks are offering solutions, but the risks are assumed by the government and by BDC. So that's the approach we're using. And I imagine that my colleague has worked with the provinces as well, because we know that the logging rights and everything is provincial jurisdiction. Yes, so this is global for everything. It's not specific to softwood. Well, the BDC help is specifically for softwood, and it's accessible. Yes, it is, and I'm hoping that the banks will go even further. I think that the problem that we see in softwood currently is that we're talking about taking more risks and going more into debt, but banks are very allergic to risks. So we created a solution that would allow banks to take these risks because we're assuming the risk. So we want to ensure that businesses in softwood lumber don't go into a spiral of debt. So that's why we have a specific approach, and that's why I want banks to be able to pay out more quickly. So is it really loans that are the best strategy for this? It doesn't seem to be. It's not a subsidy. We think that this approach for softwood via the BDC, so offering liquidity, and for processors, we also have help from the regional economic development agencies. And in that help, there's a part of it that's not reimbursable. And that policy by Canadian that was announced on September 5th, we're talking about prioritizing Canadian raw materials in federal contracts, so 25 million. And on November 9th, we heard the intention to implement that policy towards the end of 2025. Yes, we had to have the budget accepted. We still need a few important votes to do that, and I hope we can count on the Bloc for the budget. I won't say anything at this point, so I can represent you as a lawyer. So that's it. So can we expect this before the end of the year? Supposing everything goes well, the implementation will be progressive. So there are already measures that have been taken, but this will happen in the first and second quarter of 2026 for buying Canadian. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our guests for being here. Madam Minister, thank you for being here with us. I would like to talk to you about the American tariffs. I'm from Beauce. We're near the U.S., and we do a lot of business with the Americans, and we've been attacked very hard in steel and in wood. I made an economic trip in Montreal and in Beauce. I'm an entrepreneur. I understand the issues. I understand the concerns of these businesses. Madam Minister, none of these businesses wants funds from the Canadians. They just want to deal with the Americans. Yes, I understand. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, and I understand the situation currently, and I can see it because I also make visits everywhere, especially through Quebec, because I'm in charge of regional economic development in Quebec, but also all over the country. And one thing is clear. When I meet people in the affected sectors, I know that there is an anxiety, but I know that they also know that the American president and the American administration is very unpredictable. And they know that we're there to help them to pivot, because regardless of what might happen, there can always be unpredictability, uncertainty. And we know that in business, what is the most frustrating is risk management. And geopolitical risk is currently omnipresent. And that's why we offer help, we offer some equity, and we try and control what we can control. So I've met several entrepreneurs in Beauce. They have told me they want to be able to sell more in Canada and the rest of Canada, and also to France and to the European Union. But you can't pivot. You can't do that in 2 days or 2 years even. I know that. And I know that Beauce is on the American border, so the very high dependence on the American market. But we will work with those entrepreneurs to go to other markets. So in terms of programs like Buy Canadian, all that, you have to have a business that's that does about $2 million to make business. So why do you only encourage the large factories? $2 million? It's a major industry, but it's still a small or large industry. Ask those questions to the Chamber of Commerce. So why do the smaller ones not have access to that program? So I'm be happy to work with you, Jason, to see if there are businesses in particular that are having problems. We can find solutions in these sectors that are hit by tariffs. These are there are many of these industries, so I think you know the regions. You come to both from time to time. I'll take as an example the center of Quebec or Chaudière-Appalaches and Saguenay. I know those people. In addition to American tariffs, there's one other thing they talk about constantly. It's labor. They don't have enough labor. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Canada. We proposed renewing the temporary foreign worker proportion below 5.5%. There's something in the budget that hasn't been explained. They're just waiting for you to explain what's happening there, and it's up to you to control that. The Prime Minister is certainly aware of this. He's working with the businesses that are involved. I've heard about this concern in the regions also when I was in the rural regions. I hope we can work with the Conservative Party. When the opposition leader came, he said he was against temporary foreign workers. So people were shocked. So 5.5% unemployment. I don't want to play politics here, but we need those people. So I'm just asking you, when can we have the answer that we can give to our businesses? My goal is to be able to work with you, with colleagues, so that it can happen, because I know that it's important. I hear it when I go in Trois-Rivières in Quebec. I was in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean on several occasions, because it's a region that's been strongly affected because of aluminum. I have friends and acquaintances who are in business, and I hear about it, and we're in the work of developing solutions, and we'll work at this. But it's very dangerous to politicize the file of temporary foreign workers, and I find it really too bad that the leader of the opposition did this.
A fighter, and we can see it, we can feel it in your words, in the way that you speak about how you're protecting workers. I feel it. Mm-hmm. And you started your remarks by talking about how important it is to be Team Canada, to be united. And I hear this everywhere. I hear it in my community. They'll speak, you know what? This is what I'll hear. I like when the Liberals and the Conservatives, NDP, Green Party, everybody working together, understanding how big a threat this is. People know that. And they want to see everybody working together. And that is imperative. That is probably the best tool. We could talk about Buy Canadian, the Strategic Response Fund, our diversification. But the number one thing we have is keeping Canadians united as Team Canada, understanding this. And thank you for doing the job that you're doing on that. And that's my question, is that you go to the front lines. You were talking about, meeting with Unifor, Lana Payne, bringing in, the CEOs, having everybody at the table, understanding that we got to get to the right solution, the right deal. Can you tell me how you work through that process, how you meet with the front lines, how you get that message across?
So different ways. I must say, my department is very much in solution mode, because we get so many companies coming to see us, businesses, entrepreneurs, wanted either to get help because they're in the tariff sector, the sectors that are impacted by the tariffs, or want to adapt and pivot and or invest. The difference is quite stark, because we're the only country right now of the G7 that has zero tariff overall on our economy. I was just in Japan and Korea. They both have 15% tariffs. We know that that's the case for the EU. We know that, UK is 10%. And so on certain sectors, things are going well, actually, and our plan is working. And I just mentioned 67,000 jobs created in October, 60,000 the month before in September. But in the sectors that are impacted by the tariffs, the pain is real. And so we provide the information to the negotiating team with what are the impacts of the tariffs, what are basically our different sectors that are under us, which are, many, many different sectors, except from basically natural resources and energy. And that's how the Prime Minister and Dominic LeBlanc, Minister LeBlanc, and the clerk and the chief of staff also of the Prime Minister are able, and Kirsten Hellman, our ambassador to the US, are able to negotiate. So a lot of the information actually provides, it's basically market information that we have that is provided to the negotiators.
Thank you. And what I also hear on the street is people want to buy Canadian. They want to make sure. But at a bigger level, when we're looking at some of our infrastructure or building our homes, our Build Canada Homes program, how does your office work with industry to be able to have them retool or change kind of their business dynamic to be able to take this opportunity and be able to grow our country?
So I'll give you the example of steel. And we haven't talked about it, but the only Canadian steel plant that is Canadian owned is actually Algoma. And we were very, very preoccupied with what was going on at Algoma, even before the tariffs. And, then it became 25% tariffs and eventually became 50% tariffs. So I was making calls to Seaspan, the shipyard in Vancouver, that is actually part of our national shipbuilding strategy, to make sure that they would be taking orders, and making sure that they're buying steel out of Algoma. I was calling Jim Irving at Irving Shipyard and meeting also with the CEO in Halifax to make sure that they would be also buying from Algoma. Really working with the FASCO in Hamilton also with new projects to have steel cans and different ways to be able for them to be making the right type of steel. One thing that is really, really important to remember when it comes to the steel sector is the entire business model has been developed on supporting the U.S. automakers on the other side of the border. And that business plan doesn't work anymore with 50% tariffs. And by the way, the 50% tariffs are all on the steel industries around the world. And so that is why it's really important right now, and I'm heading to Algoma in the coming days, to meet the workers, to meet, the union, to meet also the leadership team, that they
Thank
be
you
able...
very, Minister, I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you very much. Savard Tremblay for 2.5, please.
Oui, merci. En fait,
Thank you. Well, maybe we'll go back to what we were talking about on the Buy Canadian program. Do you see that there's opposition or fear on the American side? So I'm not negotiating every day, but I haven't heard any concerns. You have to remember that the Americans themselves have protectionist legislation in terms of procurement. Yes, for their businesses, but probably they would like that their businesses continue to benefit from business. No, I'm not speaking personally about the American administration, but you have not experienced any pressure, and you don't think this would harm negotiations? As a former foreign affairs minister, I continue to follow developments in geopolitics because there's a relationship between my job of being in charge of the economy in Canada and what's happening in the world. And protectionist policies are emerging everywhere in the world these days. That's why I had discussions with the European Minister of Economy, Stéphane Séjourné, to know how, while they want to protect their steel market, how we could work with them so that we can continue to have free trade despite the environment of protectionism. Things are developing so quickly that we're trying not only to negotiate, but also to diversify our markets and to draft new rules, because the international commercial rules are no longer working. On another topic, on an idea of harmonization, and this idea of Chinese EVs. So harmonize the tariffs we have there. So we increased them, Canada increased them about a year ago. So it's now 100% like it is for the US. Is that still something that we need to do? We're not thinking of changing that, because Mexico also increased them by 50%. So could we use that in negotiations, even though you're not negotiating? You yourself? No, I won't make any hypotheses here for you. But one thing is clear, we have to protect our automobile sector, because tariffs of 25% that are touching 125,000 jobs has an effect on Ontario. And if Ontario is affected, the Quebec economy is also affected. The economy of the whole country is. So it's very important for me that we can defend that sector.
So in your opening statement, you referred to steel, lumber, and other critical sectors. So steel, aluminum, autos, lumber. My understanding is that those tariffs that are imposed by the U.S. are done so under the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 232, and then in the case of lumber, additionally anti-dumping and countervailing duties. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Well, yeah, it's a fact. There's also a presidential, an executive order for fentanyl, fentanyl-related tariffs.
Right,
Under the
and those
IEEPA.
would be the IEEPA tariffs.
Exactly, but they're on pause.
Right, and so you're following the court case in the United States, Voss Selections, which is dealing with the IEEPA tariffs?
I am, but as MP, like you, because I'm not in charge of the negotiation.
So my understanding, and I hope this is yours as well, as we've just established, if the Supreme Court in the United States strikes down the IEEPA tariff, that will provide no relief to the industries I just mentioned. Is that correct? Because those tariffs are imposed under different laws in the U.S.
My job here is not to make any form of hypothesis, neither.
It's not a hypothesis, it's just fact, and your
No,
job
it's
here is
not
to
a
speak on
fact.
behalf of these industries. So I just want to know, what's your
No,
understanding of that?
but
And if you don't
Jacob-
know, that's problematic. So
Jacob,
Yes
please,
or no?
can you?
Minister time to answer the
Yeah.
question, please.
if
So
she answers, yeah.
I always answer. Jacob.
Respond.
I think that there's a lot of, as I said in French, many unpredictability linked to this administration. The U.S. Supreme Court decision is obviously something that the negotiating team is following, and I must say, the entire world is following.
Know what
and
effect
so,
that will have.
Obviously, I won't, in front of this committee, develop any form of strategy or tactics that the government could take. I think that overall, we should work as one Team Canada to see what could be the impacts eventually. But I'm not here to make any form of, how can I say, analysis on what could be the impact on Canada or the world.
I guess I would suggest it's concerning that the industry minister has no analysis of what will happen if that's the case.
No, I'm sorry, but
Then tell
I
me
think-
tell me what your view is then.
my job is to help the sectors here in Canada while the negotiating team is negotiating, and they have also their own strategies. And obviously, the world is following what's going on in the U.S. every single day. We were following what was going on in Tennessee yesterday. We're
I'm not
following what's
interested in
going
talking
on
about
in
Tennessee,
Miami at the
Madam Chair.
electoral. So we have a team, and I'm talking here. I used to be in charge of foreign affairs, so I know that we have a fantastic embassy in the U.S.
Thank you,
and
Minister.
they're doing that
I'm going to
work
move on
every
because I
single
have
day.
limited time. I
No, go ahead, go
appreciate
ahead.
that. Obviously, a large part of our bilateral trade is defense production with the United States. A few weeks ago, in response to questions about the F-35, you made comments that you said you didn't believe there had been enough jobs created or industrial benefits out of the F-35 program. You repeated that yesterday, actually. And then in response, Ambassador Hoekstra made some comments suggesting that that was an impediment to our trade negotiations. You, were, as you said, were foreign minister. You were at the very first party at Mar-a-Lago with the president. If anyone should have known that injecting uncertainty into the F-35 deal would piss off the Americans, I would have thought it was you. So my question is, why would you do that at the 11th hour? Why inject uncertainty into this negotiation?
A couple of things. I was not there at the first party at Mar-a-Lago, so your facts are wrong. Second, we took a decision following the imposition of tariffs against us, which I think Canadians support. My question to you is, do you support or not the decision of putting on pause the F-35 contract? Yes or no?
I'm asking you questions, not the other way around.
I'm asking you questions. Goes both ways.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
actually.
it does.
Not at committee.
Well,
this
you
morning,
know, this is parliament. This is part of parliamentary committee.
I'm
This
just
is
asking
democracy.
you why you did that.
But Jacob, yes or no? Is that the position of the
30
Conservative
okay.
Party? Yes or no?
At the Defense Committee this morning, the Minister of National Defense said the F-35 review was his file, and he said he was reviewing it, quote, at the request of the Prime Minister. Did the Prime Minister ask you to review that as well?
I'm in charge of industrial benefits for defense contract. That's the role of
So
industry.
you are reviewing the F-35 as well?
For industrial benefits, of course. Yes, absolutely. And that's why I think we didn't get enough and we need more. And I hope the Conservative Party is in favor of that. If not, you know, we want to know.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Lavoie, please. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that I'm not there today, but I needed to be in my riding. Hello, Minister. I'm very happy to have you here with us today. And I have two questions to ask you, and I'll ask them one after the other and give you the time to respond. You know my story. I worked at banks for many years for funding businesses. What I noticed a lot is that we were funding all sectors of the economy. In all sectors, there are ups and downs. They're a bit like cycles, and often the best businesses, what happened when things were going badly in their field, they would invest, and then they could do better. And so I'm comparing with the situation currently. Things are going badly. We have tariffs. Things are not going well. But I'm seeing that there are several businesses have considered that it was a good time for them to invest currently so that when we get out of this crisis, they might be the best on the market. So my first question is, how can EDC support them currently with subsidies and investment so that they can take advantage of this time to increase their productivity? And my second question, briefly, you know, I'm MP for Beauport-Limoilou. We have the Quebec port that's in my backyard. It really is. And you were in Japan recently. You're talking to people in Japan who are saying, listen, people want to do business with us. It's time. So I'm now wearing my deputy hat for my riding because we have strategic infrastructure right near us and wonderful businesses. My second question is, how can we, with external markets, foreign markets, take advantage of our structure and have our Beauport-Limoilou businesses do well? Thank you, Steve. For the first question, we have many different programs for support. The biggest one is the Strategic Response Fund. So there's a $5 billion fund, which includes the former Strategic Investment Fund that was often used, the SIF, and that was to attract investment, especially from abroad, or help Canadian businesses to adapt and pivot. But now we decided to offer this funding to sectors that have been the victims of tariffs. So this $5 billion is very important. It allows businesses, such as those of in the sector of steel or also aluminum, to start manufacturing aluminum that will be responding to our domestic requirements, including defense. So usually what we do is send it to the U.S. and it comes back in a processed form. So that's part of the discussions I'm having with the major players in aluminum and also with smaller businesses. We also help businesses in the aluminum sector to export their products. If we look at Alouette, first trimester, 4% of their production went to Europe, and second quarter, 52% of their production of this smelter went to Europe. So that's also a part of the programs for the offers we make to these companies affected by tariffs. So the major players have access to the Strategic Response Fund, and the smaller players have access to EDC for Quebec regions, ADEC. And this is related to the question that Jason asked me. And there's a part of it that's non-reimbursable. So we know that small businesses often are not as strong economically than the bigger players. And there's a fund that's dedicated to SMEs that are affected. And for softwood, there are other programs that are offered, and I already answered those questions when Simon Pierre asked me about the softwood lumber field. And finally, yes, there is an interest for Canada. Canada is very well rated because perceived as a country that's able to, in spite of everything, manage the dynamic with the Americans quite well in a very difficult situation, where within Western democracy, the question is how to manage this relationship with the U.S.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. Merci à vous, merci à vos fonctionnaires. Nous allons prendre quelques instants pour